Hey Alex, welcome to Bring Your Own Bold. How are you doing today?
Doing very well, thanks, Dave. It's good to be here.
Awesome, awesome. Listen, let's dive straight into this super meaty topic. I don't know about you, but it feels to me like the B2B world has been talking about humanizing brands like forever. And again, I don't know about you, but in my opinion, I don't think we've cracked it at all. And I'd love to know if you feel the same way, why you don't think B2B has cracked this humanizing element yet.
Yeah, well, first thing I'd say is I agree with you entirely. Like, this is something that kind of, certain circles on LinkedIn have been talking about forever. And I'm not sure that it ever gets any better. I think there's always like a 10%, sort of roughly 10% of the industry does it really well, and 90% does it really badly, or at least average at best. And why? It's a really good question. I think there's a few different parts to this answer, but the first one that I'd always pick up on is fear, right? And I think that what that comes from is B2B brands, they grow to a certain point. Often they're very successful very quickly, and they grow to a certain point, and then suddenly there's this kind of panic moment of like, okay, we're now going after enterprise clients. So now we need to sound professional, right? Whatever that means. Or we need to sound enterprise, whatever that means. And so there's this kind of jump for an island of safety of like, okay, we want to be too distinctive. We don't want to be too colloquial. And we want to make sure people know that we know our technical stuff. So you end up with this kind of conflation of lots and lots of technical jargon, lots of acronyms. And you notice this in H1s, particularly on the websites of B2B brands, how it's like 10 adverbs and, God knows how many other bits. By the time you've read the H1, you've already fallen asleep. So I think there's that fear there, and I think there's a fear that if we don't do this, then we're not gonna win enterprise clients, and we're not gonna challenge incumbents. And that basically comes down to, I think, something more primal and really human, which is if we do this, what if people don't like it? And so the fear of people not liking it, which often comes from senior executive leadership and often founders, because it's very personal. Often, if it's a founder of the business who's still running the business, it's something they set up, it's their baby. And this fear of what if people don't like our tone, what if people don't like the way that we communicate. And so you kind of default to grey, which is a really, really depressing place to be. And I guess I finished this part of the answer with a quote from Bill Burnback, the legendary ad executive. He was behind the famous VW ads that everyone in the industry kind of pastes over LinkedIn about once every 18 months. But he said, if you stand for something, you'll always find some people for you and some people against you. But if you stand for nothing, you'll find nobody against you and nobody for you.
I love that. I also love that it's ironically it's a human thing to want to be less human or to feel like you have to be less human. There's definitely a bit of irony there.
Absolutely.
But also, I mean, do you think that there's also an element of wanting that in B2B it feels like there's a constant kind of pull towards almost blending in. The category expects us to do this, so we should do it. Everybody else is doing this, so if we do something different, we'll be seen as mavericks or outliers. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but as I said, there seems to be this inherent pull back towards doing something. If that something is less human, then brands feel more inclined to do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of herd mentality and groupthink. And I think I really, I don't want to sound like a boomer here, but I blame the internet for this. I think that we've all now got kind of hyper connected access to everybody else's brand. So, every time a B2B product rebrands on LinkedIn, somebody will send it to me. Somebody in my organization or another one will send it to me. And it will be the little rebrand video, and I'll watch it and go, oh, that's nice. Oh, I like that. I like what they did there. Or, various other thoughts, perhaps that I wouldn't share publicly. And I think that feeds into the fear thing again of like, oh, this person's done this, we should do it exactly as you said. So there's some herd mentality and groupthink there. And it kind of reinforces to allow people to blend and converge around a few design principles or a few kind of copy tricks, if you like. And as you know, I mean, you called this whole event "Bring Your Own Bold," right? That's if you want to make a stand and separate yourself out from the market and become ideally a category leader, you need to create a stronger tone of voice, and a huge part of that is humanizing your tone of voice.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, you're exactly right. We're in the right place to talk about this conversation in terms of bringing your own bold. That's very much what this event is about, finding your authentic bold and what makes you you, and then obviously taking that out to market in a way that is true to yourself. And that's something that you guys at Papaya Global have certainly cracked. I mean, hence the reason for wanting to talk to yourself today. Um, why, going a little bit deeper into that kind of inside story of why have you made a conscious decision to prioritize this at a brand level?
So I think I'm going to kind of answer with both humanizing the way that your tone of voice, but also tone of voice itself, right? So creating a character, which is part of it, right? You create an identity in the way that you speak to people. Well, I think it's how you become a category leader. It's how you become a globally recognized brand. And if you look at Apple, Nike, and Red Bull in the sort of B2C space, they've all done that to an exceptional degree. But also, it's true of B2B brands. Look at Slack and Salesforce. And many others. I was going to say Microsoft then, but I think Microsoft is a very mixed bag. It really depends on which product you're talking about. Um, but brands that have a distinctive tone of voice and can communicate with clarity, particularly when they're talking about technical products, technical things, to an audience that doesn't necessarily know a great level of technical detail about those products, then you have the opportunity to get front of mind. You have the opportunity to create an emotional connection with somebody so that when somebody thinks of your category or your product line, that your brand isn't far away from being the next thought. So if I say to you toothpaste, I'm willing to bet you're probably thinking of Colgate right now.
Spot on.
Maybe. Yeah, exactly, right. So maybe Aquafresh, maybe Sensodyne, depending on your specific brand choice and the problem that you're solving. But you've got one in mind. And so for us at Papaya, well, it's like, how do we own global payments, people getting paid, particularly workers getting paid, but also other businesses. And so it's right there in our tagline, how the world gets paid. We didn't create a tagline that was kind of about the platform, the technology, the jargon. We wanted to create a simple association in people's minds between Papaya Global and people getting paid. That's it. And doing that is about choosing one thing, a really simple idea, communicating it clearly, ideally on an emotional level, so that when people think of your sector, your industry, you're the first brand that comes to mind.
And is that an easy thing to do internally, first of all, to get people bought in around this kind of thing? Because obviously, Papaya Global is, as we said, as the clues in the name, a global business. There's lots of different people that are responsible for kind of carrying forward the brand, both internally and externally. Kind of how easy is it to bed in that single-minded idea? Is it a little bit easy because it is one single-minded idea, or is it still quite a challenge because you're talking about tone of voice and you're talking about people at the end of the day?
Absolutely, and that's the biggest challenge I think for any business, not just in my career, but every business that I've worked with and for, and all the people I know who do similar roles to me. The biggest challenge is the internal battle. It's not doing the work, because if you've got talented people and love working with talented people, they tend to be pretty good at creating the assets that you need and working on a great brand book and sort of creating a framework to make these messages work. That bit's actually just like the meat and potatoes of working in brand and being a creative director. The difficult bit is winning hearts and minds, explaining to people the value of this kind of work. And it's the trick for me is you have to get people to think about how they look at other brands. Because if you keep telling them, no, this is what we need to do, you're essentially you're trying to pull them. And if you're trying to pull people, they tend to resist, right? People don't like being told what to think and what to do. So what I try to do is reframe it the other way of asking them, okay, when you see the word air, what's the first thing that comes to mind? And they will usually say Nike. Or I'll say, I know what you're thinking about right now. I think I know what you're thinking about right now. It's Nike. So I use things like that, little thought exercises and perspective shifts to help people to see the value of what I'm trying to do, so that they can imagine our brand from the perspective of an outsider. Because it's like trying to give yourself therapy otherwise, or look at the back of your own head. You need to get that external perspective to change the way that you think.
Yeah, yeah, it makes so much sense. And then I suppose once you've got that kind of that tone of voice, that ethos locked into a certain extent, obviously, because it is a constantly evolving thing. But kind of once you've got that locked in, are there certain channels or maybe even like facets of your brand where you focus on dialing up that humanized approach, and then obviously this is a kind of a two-part question. Conversely, where do you have to dial it down? And as we said before, there are certain areas where you need to fit in as a category.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is great. This is where context comes in, and context is everything, particularly in B2B, I think much more so than B2C. So, to give you an example, humor is one of the three pillars of our tone of voice guidelines, specifically wit, kind of, ironic humor, the raised eyebrow. Economist, I think of the Economist a lot when I'm trying to explain it to people in terms of the tone of voice and the kind of wit that we go for. Now that will be very prevalent in a TV ad, or particularly a Super Bowl ad, and you'll kind of see it, in a lot of above the line stuff that we do. But the general rule of thumb for us is that humour fades the closer we get to the customer. So, for instance, when somebody's emailing to ask about the status of a $1 million transaction, humour is very much not on the menu, and nor should it be. But you'll see it in a TV ad. Whereas there are some B2C brands where you'll see humour and jokes in the UX of the app, right? And it's appropriate for them. And when it's pulled off well, it's a really powerful way of keeping an audience engaged and bringing the brand to life for them. But for us, it's much less appropriate, right? So it's a sliding scale, and it helps us also to lean into the other pillars of our tone of voice. So you have other places to go depending on the kind of content that you're producing.
That makes so much sense. I really like that. Humour fades as you get closer to the customer. It's almost like saying to and I'll go back to the internal teams point here, it's time to get serious when it comes down to brass tacks. But actually, you can have a lot of fun, obviously, in so many different areas outside of that. I think you mentioned kind of big game ads there. But this is something that you guys have done for a little while now, and I'm proud to say I've actually featured in one indirectly through your amazing AI experience in your last big game ad. But what's the thinking here, and especially in particular, what's the strategic reason for investing in such a major play?
Yeah, it's a great question because when it first began to be discussed internally, I mean, obviously, I was very, very excited. I think most
Okay.
creatives dream of getting to work on one Super Bowl ad, let alone two, and two for the same brand, which was kind of nuts. But there were some questions like, well, hold on, why are we doing this? Why is it relevant for us to B2B brand, particularly a B2B fintech brand? And the first part of that is really clear and I think fairly obvious. It's about casting a long shadow. So we're a significant player in the industry that we're in, but we are going after the incumbents in this market, right? So, people that have been around for companies that have been around for decades. And in order to demonstrate to enterprise level clients and the kind of business that we're now winning, that we're a significant brand and we're taking mind share, the Super Bowl is a great way to do that, or it can be a great way to do that. So in the first year that we did it, it was kind of about announcing to the world that we're here and showing the world what we do, the problem that we're solving for the world. And the second year was kind of a doubling down of showing that we're really sticking around. But there's a nuance to this as well because there was a great kind of uplift, obviously, in our direct traffic to our website, huge uplift, massive uplift in brand searches on Google, and various other metrics. We had a record quarter after the first Super Bowl ad. I can't share exact numbers, but it was a great quarter. So there's a kind of headline level that's really clear, a clear benefit for doing something like that. But there's a secondary thing, which is the PR angle. And I know that in the age of TikTok, it's a bit old fashioned to talk about press coverage. But for us as a B2B brand, the people we're trying to influence read publications like the Financial Times, like TechCrunch. Investors read publications like TechCrunch. And we managed to generate 250 pieces of coverage in mostly tier one publications precisely because it was an unusual decision. So we had the story became was the story, if you see what I mean. I'll rephrase that. The ad
I know
itself
what you mean.
became a story.
Hmm.
Um, and so that allowed us to create a kind of whole secondary level of content, material, and marketing about why we did this. And I think the TechCrunch headline was fabulous. It was something like, "Why are B2B startups placing a $7 million bet on the Super Bowl?" Which is the kind of coverage that you dream of.
Yeah, 100%. It's the kind of coverage that you dream of, and as you say, the ad can be the story to a certain extent, but you still have to create an ad that works in that space. How much of a challenge was that, especially given what we've talked about in terms of not just getting the ad right in that context, but also getting the brand tone of voice spot on?
That's a great question. I don't really think of that as the hard bit because I love it. I absolutely love it. It's like it's the best part of the job for me. And if you get a room full of creative and talented people together with a brief like that, I don't care what the product is. I'd happily have a go at selling just about anything if you give me a Super Bowl spot to do it. And I think most creatives would agree with you, right? It's the dream brief. But to answer your question with a little more detail, we had clear brand guidelines. So we knew, for instance, the kind of humor that we're looking for, which was sort of witty and ironic over obvious gags, if you like. Although, having said that, I realise our second spot did feature a guy with two giant mallets for hands. But we weren't afraid to go into sort of surreal and slightly subversive places as well. But we had a clear idea about so things like we wanted a CFO in there. We wanted an offer, even though we took the dream sequence in the second ad off to a field in South Africa, it was still fundamentally an office, right? With people involved in finance processes popping up during this guy's anxiety dream, right? So we had clear ideas about how it should be set, who should be featured, that the CFO or CHRO should be able to see themselves in the ad. But once we kind of established those guidelines, we allowed kind of creativity to run wild and come up with weird and strange and exciting ideas to tell that story.
It's a great ad. I love it. Really, really nice. I mean, I must admit the first time I watched it the whole way through, it had my face in it because of that little AI play. If we can just touch on that for a minute, how did that come about? So for people who don't know, Papaya Global also created a little landing page where you can go in, upload a photo of yourself, and then you appear in their ad. It's a stunning piece of activation, actually, and something that I'm surprised we haven't seen a little bit more of in the age of AI, or even just kind of, the technology's there anyway, basically to do it, whether it's AI or not. But that was a great way of humanizing it for your wider audience, not just in the case of CFOs seeing themselves in the ad, but actually lots of other people as well. So how did that whole process come about?
Oh, it's just a great example of bringing in lots of talented people at the same time. I would love to tell you that was my idea. I'd love to, but sadly it was not. But I'm delighted. I think it actually came from someone at McCann. Um, and I initially was quite skeptical because I was sort of hearing, oh yeah, we'll do an AI thing, right? Like oh yawn, like everybody's doing an AI thing now. But then I saw the concepts, and it was a really creative and unique and original way of elevating the existing ad. Um, and the execution was great. I was surprised by the execution as well, that the technology, which we're talking about 6, 7 months ago now, and this technology is moving so fast. But back then, it wasn't a sure thing that that kind of thing would work really well. But we tested it enough times internally, and the results were great. So we realized it was a way, exactly as you said, that we could widen the audience for the ad, and also do a little bit of lead gen as well. So it did two jobs for us there.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. Just talking a little bit about kind of not just the big game ad, although this probably will come into the conversation, but whether it's that or whether it's another piece of content or an activation or a campaign or whatever it may be, do you have a particular kind of process internally? And by you, I mean, the collective you in terms of your team, for kind of ensuring that whatever it is, the end result finds the right balance of that human emotional connection, but also that rational side of things, getting the actual message across that your product does what it does in an effective way for that audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is really important because it comes back to this idea that, of context. So the kind of people that we're appealing to are making multi-million dollar decisions. This is not an impulse buy. So at some point, they've got to have a very high level of confidence that we know what we're talking about, that our software isn't going to fall over, that we've got the correct security and compliance legislation sorted, and that we're appropriately registered and authorized and all of this stuff. So again, I think as we move closer to the customer, once we move beyond brand advertising and above the line stuff, we start to layer in really detailed content that is kind of there both on a push and a pull basis. So we will push stuff through sales teams in ABX where it's relevant, but also pull so it's available there on request. We have things like the knowledge base, which is this huge compendium of relevant knowledge for finance professionals and HR professionals. Lots and lots of tools like that, really rigorously audited content that demonstrates and explains exactly how and why we do things. And I think the best example of that is compliance for us, because we're a regulated business, we're a financial services provider, we're a fintech company, and so compliance has to be absolutely bulletproof. And we've got some great tools that help with that. So I mean, nothing's going to replace the auditing process of a well-versed compliance team. So we're in regular contact with our compliance team and checking stuff over before it goes out. But in order to reduce that kind of, to get content to a better standard before it goes out, we've got things like the head of content at Papaya developed a compliance checker using AI. So you can feed your article or content into the compliance checker and it will basically just check for red flags. It won't tell you your content's great, because obviously it's going to get it wrong often, but it will red flag stuff and say, oh, you should look at this, you should look at this, you should look at this, based on a set of rules and criteria. And that just helps again to elevate the standard to the point that when we ask for approval or pass something over to a compliance specialist, they're already looking at a piece of content that's been through a few rounds, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I just had visions there of you amalgamating those two AI things. So it's a compliance checker, but it's also got your face on it and a mallet just smashing down all the red flags. But I don't
Fantastic.
know,
I love
maybe I've
it.
just put an idea in your head there. I'm not too sure.
Love it.
Alex, this has been such a great conversation. Really, really enjoyed hearing about how you guys at Papaya Global have humanized your brand to such an amazing degree. I've just got one more question to end on, if it's okay with you. I know that, actually, am I right in saying this? I just need to double check this. This is your first B2B role. Is that correct?
I have worked on B2C companies who also sell a B2B product before. But yeah, it's my first like pure B2B SaaS company.
Yeah. What's been the biggest challenge for you of trying to humanize when you're inside that machine and you're part of that business as a creative lead? What's been the most challenging part of trying to humanize a B2B software brand?
So I think we've already talked about winning hearts and minds, and I'm very fortunate that at Papaya that hasn't been a struggle because I'm working with people who communicate very well and people who understand the value of building a brand that way. I think the size and scale is a big challenge, right? And the speed. So size, scale, and speed. So we're a huge product. We send money to over 160 countries in the local currency of those countries, and we fund in well over a dozen, I think 14 now funding currencies, which means obviously multiple languages, different compliance and regulations all over the world. Because, for instance, in the United States, you don't just have one set of federal regulations; you've also got state-based regulations and compliance and employment law as well. So there's scale and complexity. And that's something that's quite difficult in the beginning to get your head around, to establish, okay, how do I figure out messaging that's going to work in all of these environments, and how far do I need to customize that messaging and the way that we communicate. Speed is obviously another big one because everything just changes so fast. Not just the industry, but the tools themselves. AI is the obvious one here. But regulations as well, they change rapidly. And the way that people do business is changing. International cooperation is changing. So there's a lot of stuff to stay on top of. And finally, I think, yes, we talked about scale, we talked about speed and complexity. The complexity angle also plays into technology of the actual platform. Our platform changes really fast. We're building new features and tools very, very quickly. So I need to spend time with product managers and engineers. I need to spend time with compliance officers. And I need to hear how this stuff works. Because, for instance, if I get a designer joining the company, the last thing I want to hear is that knowing the product or talking to product isn't their job. It is the job, right? Understanding the product at a deep level is the job, so that you can communicate the value of that product to customers and users.
Well, it sounds like you definitely had your hands full, but you guys are doing such a fantastic job. So once again, hats off to you and the team at Papaya, absolutely smashing it. And thank you so much for joining me on this session of Bring Your Own Bold 2025. It's been a real pleasure, Alex. Thank you so much. And to you guys watching this, don't forget there's plenty more Bring Your Own Bold content to consume. So do go onto the hub, make sure that you have a play around, watch all the sessions that interest you, and let us know what you think. But from me, it just remains to say, once again, thanks, Alex. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of Bring Your Own Bold.